How about now? Why do I hear... Interesting. Okay. Maybe... I've been fiddling with the mics and everything. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? So I don't really know where this all ended up. Why can I hear my own voice in my earbud? That sounds weird. Okay, yay, volume. Thanks, guys. Hi, Megan and Michaela and Ryan and Max. Hi, guys. Glad you can be on the stream. I was just kind of blathering on, waiting to see if you guys could hear me, but I've had a cold the last few days, and I've started to lose my voice just this last couple of days. I guess I've had a cold for a week now, but, so, I've lost about an octave, and we're gonna see how well my voice does during this live stream. And I got my tea, I got my water. Hopefully my voice will stay with us. See what you guys are chatting about. Ryan's writing. Oh, cool. Megan, you looking at the middle of end of May for releasing? That's pretty cool. I assume you're doing like self-publishing, all that jazz. That's got to be a lot to... Sorry, guys. Ooh, this is going to be fun. But that must be a lot to handle and be doing. I wonder, why can I hear myself? I'm just going to take this out because I hear my own echo and it's bothering me. Oh, and Melanie's here. Hi, Melanie. Glad you can make it. I didn't have a ton of agenda for today. I kind of just wanted to come on here and talk about some of what I've been thinking about and just take the chance to connect with you guys before I'm going to take a couple month hiatus here with new baby coming. So, you're self-publishing. You just love marketing. Not my cup of tea. Not what I enjoy either. Michaela, you're asking what is a good way to write comedic dialogue? Oh, thanks, Melody. Yeah, pretty excited about baby number 3. It's gonna be a crazy transition, but very excited. You guys are silly. So I kind of thrown up a lot of options what we could talk about up in a poll, and just talking about strengths and weaknesses as a writer and what to do about it and strategizing how to tackle some of that stuff was kind of what won the poll. So I guess I could just kind of start with where I'm at lately with writing. The last couple of years, year and a half maybe, I've been really focusing on, not even intentionally, this is just what I was interested in, and so it's what I gravitated towards, but towards like the deeper meaning of story and how to implement what the story is about to a greater degree. Embed it in the characters, embed it in the plot, embed it in the visuals. How do you make it all cohesive and saying what you're trying to say, and how do you know what you're trying to say, and getting down to the very specific things that you're trying to convey. So it's been about a year and a half of reading about that, thinking about that, studying film about that. to where I kind of feel like I've reached the end of that season of study, I guess is what I would say. I've reached the point where I am starting to write about my own conclusions about it, which has been interesting because it's what I was planning on kind of doing a live stream about here, but I started writing about it and it turned to be way too long, and I'm not ready. I haven't worked through all of it enough to actually express a lot of it. So that's going to be a project when I get back to being able to do projects like that, is to actually work through it all and get it written out and see where that goes. So I've kind of started looking forward to, like, what's my next thing? What am I going to be studying next? What am I going to be working on next? And the area that has seemed the weakest to me, that I have always come up against issues with, is what I call plot. But as I was trying to, like, sit down and actually express what it is, it's not exactly plot. It's, and this is part of my problem. Probably why I struggle with some of this is because I don't actually know what it is. But it's not structure. Structure is easy for me. Structure is what I live and breathe. It's so much fun. I love structure. It's the other part of plot besides structure. And I've been like, okay, what? I need a name for this so that I can research it or do something with it. But the way that it comes up is when, and I've experienced this with everything I've written, but probably I saw it the most during Match Made, just because it was such a bigger project than I've ever done before. Is, okay, these two characters have to talk. I even know what they're going to talk about. But where are they going to talk? Like, what is the setting and the situation that has brought them together? And my brain just kind of goes blank. Like, I mean, it could be in a car, it could be at this place, it could be that place. And so, but I experienced that so consistently throughout the entire thing. So, like I said, I understand structure. I'm like, okay, this is like the point where they meet the bad guys. What is that sequence? Like, if it's an action film, where are they fighting? Where are they going through? What would be a cool scene? Like, my brain just doesn't really think about that. So it's like the practicalities of the plot, maybe? Because I know structure-wise what should be happening there. And character-wise, what should be happening there is just the actual scene. You know what I'm talking about? And I feel like you can really see this when you watch Match Made, because a lot of the scenes are just kind of there, and they're just kind of, things are happening, and there's not a huge lot of why behind it. Like, and I think we fix a lot of it in the later drafts, but the early drafts especially, any scene with, like, her brother in it, that was kind of about that storyline of her relationship with her brother and her relationship with her brother and her brother's fiance. It was kind of like, okay, they need to have this discussion, but the details of it, because they talk a lot about, especially the first drafts, they were talking about selling. At that time, it was a farm. They lived on a farm that their dad had run. And it was like, they were going to sell the farm, but, she thought Spencer was going to come back and want to run the farm. And he came back, he's like, no, I'm getting married and I don't really want to run the farm. I have a different life vision. And so she feels stuck with the farm. And so there was all these details around the farm and how long they had it and where it was. And it was like all these plot details. And that was the notes that we got back on some of those drafts. Was like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand the details of the plotting that's happening here. These lines seem contradictory, that it's in this place, but then it was over there. And do they live on the farm? Is it different than the Christmas tree farm? And that we changed it eventually to be the fly fishing shop in the movie. But it was still kind of like, that was just because that was a location we found. There wasn't a lot of meaning behind choosing that as our setting, and I don't know. You guys understanding what I'm trying to express? Maybe you have plot execution, story logistics. There you go. Yeah. And so it makes outlining very difficult, a very slow and agonizing process. And so some of what I've linked this to is a few different things, but one of them being what we would call not having a small enough box. Like when you're writing a feature and it's kind of like, okay, you could write anything you want. I get really stuck in that feeling of, okay, but I could write anything I want. I don't want to write anything I want. I want to understand what my box is and what my limitations are. And gosh, sorry about the coughing, guys. And more ideas would come out of that. That's part of it. Like I don't feel like a terribly creative person. Like, oh, you could just do anything and all these ideas come to mind. It's more like, no, I want specific metrics of what I'm trying to do and hitting those marks, and it's a different mindset. Another thing is I think it's a focus on, I don't have a strong focus on visuals. That's true as a director, as a filmmaker. That's why I love working with Max, because he has such a strong focus on visuals. I don't. I have it on character, on story. And so I don't see things very clearly. And it's like the weak area itself is in this entertainment zone of what would be really fun to watch, what would be really entertaining to watch, really exciting to watch. And it was okay in Match Made because it wasn't that kind of film, but I still look at some of the scenes and go, okay, so this just really isn't that interesting to watch. It's kind of just a scene that's happening. And I didn't know how to fix it at the time. Melanie says, I feel like when it comes to choosing the setting, be creative and make sure that's an interesting setting. That's, I can't, when I say, okay, be creative, come up with something creative, it's like blank. It has to fit this criteria, it needs to fix this problem, it needs to say this thing about the character. It's like, that's where creativity comes from for me, is solving these problems. It's not really just be creative. You know what I mean? Which is, I think this, like, that's why I'm saying it's specific to me as a writer, or it's specific to how I approach writing, I guess, and what makes sense for me. So that is probably going to be the area that I want to tackle next when I get back to writing. But it's kind of up to you guys what you want to do today. I was kind of like, well, I could start kind of my research on how to fix this, how to learn what I'm trying to learn, because I don't think you can, I don't know, maybe you guys know, I don't think you can just say, like, I need a book about plot execution or story logistics. Like, I need a book or a video about this, or it's just not a very effective way to research it, I don't think. So I actually have to research what I need to research, was kind of where I was going to start, and I have some ideas for that we could just do, and you guys can hang out with me as I do that. Or we could, if any of you guys have kind of a weak area that you wanted to get into, we could also go down that rabbit trail, explore that. I'm kind of, like I said, I don't have a real strong agenda for today. Just wanted a chance to connect. it's it's been an interesting season of study. Michaela says you prefer the latter. Okay. Anybody else have any opinions? Anybody want to volunteer line of... I can't tell if that's a typo or not. Yeah. Here, I'm going to put up... So, I had thrown this in the group real quick. Hang on a second. It's gonna bug me, so I'm gonna wait. Move myself over a little bit. There we go. Okay. It's gonna bug me. I'm gonna cut my face off the whole time. So this is something that I had thrown up real quick, that I put together real quick, just kind of looking at different things to see if this would help spark thoughts for anyone on what they feel like they want to focus on. Michaela's like, what's a good way to write comedic dialogue? Well, I don't actually know. I'm not a comedian writer. But we could go into research for that. That's kind of what I was planning on doing. What I do know about it, just to kind of start off, is it's all about setup. So that's the dynamic between the characters needs to kind of be inherently amusing. So you can do that through the situation, and you can do that through the inherent character conflict. So, the obvious one is if you have a really goofy character and you have a really serious character, it's kind of the traditional goofy man, straight man. Then the dynamic is inherently funny, and so how they each approach the situation that they're in together and how they bounce off of each other is what makes it funny. And then the dialogue springs from that. So for a lot of dialogue, it's all about the setup and getting all your pieces in the right place so that you're not fighting a serious situation or a undynamic set of characters while trying to be very spontaneous and funny. Like, that's the thing about humor. A lot of it has to be very spontaneous in the moment. It's a lot of dynamic and bouncing off of each other. And that's what that's what I know about directing comedy, is it's all about just set it up and let the actors go. Set it up, let the actors inherently play with the inherently funny situation. So some of writing comedic dialogue, if it's like, it's just not working, this just isn't funny, it might be going back to, okay, so what's the root of these characters? What's the root of the situations that they're in? And I'm trying to think of some examples. I don't know, what's like the funniest dialogue you feel you've ever heard or read? I don't know if I've read it, but there's also different forms. You write and illustrate. I've seen that around a little bit. So most, if not all, is comedy. Right. And situational comedy too. I think what I would research is formatting, or how would you say this? It's kind of like, in a con man movie, or a something like Ocean's 11, like a heist movie, they're always throwing around names for all the different situations. Oh, we're going to pull a loose gem, and we're going to pull this trick or that trick or this strategy to get something done. comedy also has a lot of those things too. We're gonna pull this type of shtick. We're gonna pull this situation, and so you can get really familiar with kind of the general tropes of scene setups. And that's a really good area to research. Like, what are all the different kind of setups, so that when you're writing and you're coming up with the dialogue, it's like you already have kind of some standard templates, I guess is what I would call them. Standard templates to go off of. So one of the ones that comes to mind for me that I know of is kind of this persistent sort of humor where it's not funny until like the 5th time. I don't know how to describe that any differently, but like, it's not for movies. This is true. It's not funny until about 3 seconds in, 3 to 5 seconds in, and then the character just keeps going with the shtick or going with the gag, and it gets funnier and funnier and funnier as it goes, and that's what makes it funny. The first couple times aren't that funny. It's hanging on to it and running with it so long that it makes it funny. It's like things like that, like strategies and tactics that you can kind of pull out and try with your different jokes, and like, okay, what is the structure that's going to support that joke, you know? Tons of conflict. Yep. Melanie says, you hate writing descriptions. Hey, same. But you're not also one who likes really long descriptions. Yeah, okay. I'm glad that's helpful, Michaela. So, descriptions. Gosh, I'm sorry about this cough, guys. Ugh. Well, let's stick on comedy writing for a minute, because I want to see what I can kind of find here. So often when I'm researching, here, let me transition to so you can see. I kind of just start with a very simple Koei ads. Thank you. Very simple like Google search. And I know often the advice that you find on top of the list here is like the most banal. Like yes, I know that. Like the most obvious thing to think of. But you know. Give it. I usually when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and research something. That means I'm giving it a couple hours. That means I'm not just like. I don't want a quick answer. I want to understand. That's what I mean by like sitting down to research. So I'm fine with the first couple of things. Kind of like, yeah, I kind of know that, but maybe you'll stumble across something that will really help you. Don't telegraph the joke. Put the funny part at the end. See, that's what I mean by. Well, yeah, duh. But it's just the punchline. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm trying to figure out the mic situation. Let me know if you can still hear me and if the echo is gone. I've been playing with the audio a whole bunch, trying to figure out, what I was trying to figure out is this thing that I've been trying to figure out this whole time of live streaming is how do I watch a YouTube video where you can hear it and I can hear it. And it's been a mess. And there's something about So there's articles like this that kind of just have some general tips and stuff. Okay, some areas of research that I would look at are a few different things, I guess. It would be comedy rules in general. Do you actually understand comedy and the heart of comedy? And maybe you have a really good instinct for it, but do you actually understand it? Because instinct will take you a ways, but it kind of fails you when you hit a problem, because then you don't actually have the tools in your toolbox to confront that problem and be like, okay, here's the strategy I could work. Here's the strategy I could use. So do you actually understand the fundamentals of comedy, or is there more research that can be done there? That's kind of like one avenue of research. Then there's specific comedy. And in that area, kind of all the usual advice applies. Do you read a lot of comedic comics? Are you really familiar with the format? Are you really familiar with the type of jokes that work? What's your favorite kind of style? All those sort of things get caught up in studying and researching specifically comic comedy. Then there's looking at alternate forms of comedy. Like I said, kind of what are the shticks? There's visual comedy, there's stand-up comedy, there's film comedy, there's more novel, like writing out in prose comedy. How do you have a funny voice when you're writing? Like there's all these kind of little specific areas that they may not specifically apply to what you're doing, but they would offer little keys and tricks and different perspectives on what you're trying to do that might inform different problem areas that you run into. You usually just wing it. Yeah. Winging it works really, really well until it's like, oh, the creativity's gone. Oh, there's nothing here. So I don't know, Michaela, what do you think is kind of with comics, is it visual comedy that you like more, or is it the joke, the lines? I don't know. I have never done anything like that. Oops. What's happening? Let me know if you want to keep going down this, or if you feel like there's a specific area that would be helpful. It's kind of hard for me to get specific because I don't know very much. Usually lean toward lines, but combine facial expressions with dynamic poses. So it's more about the joke. It's more and less about the visual joke. Yeah, I would just study the comedy itself, how to structure jokes. I'm sure there is, and this is why I say you can look at other forms of comedy too, because if you think about like stand-up comedy, I'm sure there's a lot of resources out there about how to structure jokes, to get the most out of them, but also how to have a process to come up with jokes. I can imagine that comic stripping is kind of so niche that there's not a lot to, like, if you just look that up itself, there's not a lot of resources there in that specific niche. Love slapstick, but not at setting really funny comics. Okay, well, that's kind of where I would go. I would kind of, what I would do for myself as, I'm like, okay, this is an area that I want to research. I would mark aside time for research. Like I said, it would be like, I'm going to do a research session that's like 2 hours. And then I would also make a list of, it's like brainstorming basically, but you're brainstorming a battle plan. I'm going to make a list of everything that I could research about this, and then I'm just going to pick what sounds most interesting to me right now. And put some time and work into that sort of thing. All right, Melanie was asking about descriptions. Are you talking about in prose, in like novel writing, prose writing, not necessarily screenwriting? Because I will tell you the reason I am a screenwriter is because I also hate descriptions. I'm with you, I guess. I'm with you on, I don't particularly love to read descriptions either. Even ones that are beautiful, that are meaningful and evocative. It's like, I could do without. My favorite books, I've noticed, tend to have a very minimalist style. They say a lot with much less words, to the point where sometimes I'm like, there actually could have been a little bit more there, if I'm being honest. But that is where I tend to lean in my preferences as well. Novel writing, yes. Used to rough draft in script form, yes. Right. So, how do we begin researching this? Because I'm not great at this. I don't really know. What I know about descriptions, I guess, is where I would start. They're about tone. They're also about, I think, the equivalent utility that they have in filmmaking is what we would call setting the geography, which is especially important in action scenes, is where if the audience doesn't understand the geography, where the people are in relation to the other people, in relation to the setting, then it's just going to be a big confusing mess because you're cutting all over the place and actions are happening all over the place. And I imagine that description does a lot of the same work in novels as well. You're setting the correct geography for your scene. That's more practical, less artistic sort of thing. But that's usually the case with everything. It's like practical and artistic need to combine in a nice, healthy way so that we understand, but it's beautiful, and that's actually the challenge and all that sort of stuff. One small paragraph of descriptions is enough. Indeed. What do I know about descriptions? Yes, tone and geography are your necessities. And then again, just talking about like strategizing. I would start with 2 lists. Make a list of kind of what we just did with Michaela, but here's a list of everything I could research, but also a list of, and it will grow as you research, a list of like to-dos, a list of things to, a list of strategies for learning. So for instance, with myself, it would be set aside time to really work on descriptions, like just scratch, do like, I don't know if you've ever done like the 5-minute or 10-minute writing challenge sort of things where, you know, you start with like 3 words and you pick one of them as the first word you have to do, and then you set a timer for 10 minutes and you just have to write. Just start writing, and whatever comes out, and you start with one of the words and you have to incorporate the 2 other words as you go. It's kind of like these little writing challenges to get warmed up, to get in the habit of writing sort of stuff. Like, do something like that, but on descriptions. Like, so that would be something that would be on my strategy list. It's like, here's things that I could do to actually work this skill and grow in it so that when I'm actually writing, it's not such a struggle. Use creative, colorful wording to bring the description alive. Yes. I wonder if creative and okay, so this is a preference thing. Let me just say that first off. I wonder if creative and colorful are the right words to think about this. I guess the way that I think about it is like evocative. I want, when I use a word, it gives not only an image, but it gives an energy. It gives a sense of the thing, whatever that is. So it's not just, oh, her robes were, I'm horrible at descriptions, so this is going to be bad, but like, take a character and then describe everything about how they look. Or you could take a character and say, she was all sharp angles or clean lines, or, you know, something like that, where you're not having to describe everything. You're describing the sense of what you would get when looking at that character. Right. To me, that would be a way that would be like less is more. And so I wouldn't focus so much on, oh, it has to be fun to read or it has to be creative and colorful. It's just, I want a very clear, focused sense of this setting, of this character, of this moment. And I guess that goes more for like introductory sort of stuff. As you get further into the story, it's also about conveying the characters through your descriptions. Like, you're describing what they're doing, you're describing, okay, we cut into a scene where a character is really angry and we have to describe that sort of thing. And it's, I'm sure you guys know all this. I'm more rambling to get my own head in it, but how can you convey the character's state of mind through the words? Anywho, let us see if Google has anything off the top. Oh, here's what I was going to say about that. That's where I was going. In terms of writing evocative descriptions, especially as you get later into the story, there's an element of having to be really, really truthful and transparent with yourself. Okay, what would I feel? What would that character feel? What does that feel like? And having to get down to the bottom, the very real place, and not just sticking with the physical description. I'd have to come up with some examples to make it more concrete than that. So, like, some of the top things here that Google is saying are, like, again, obvious. Use sensory details, be in character, use dynamic words, but some of that is like, use dynamic words. How do you know what dynamic words to use? It's like, you have to get really real and authentic in what those things actually feel like at their most simple. You know what I mean? If you're talking about using less words to say more, not having to use flowery language to describe every piece and every sensation that they feel in this moment. It's what is the most basic version of the idea, and then what is the best word to describe just that most basic concept. I think I know what that word is. Ha. Oh, yes. Point out something unique, their walk, their clothes, the way they act. Well, something that I've seen in kind of more clumsy describing is something about them just gave this sense of power, or something about them just gave this sense of capability, or something like that. And it's like, okay, that's kind of like cheating, though, because you're saying something and not actually telling us what that something was. And so if you have a paragraph like that, oh, the whole thing just gave this sense of something like this, it's like, okay, you haven't got down to the root of what you're trying to convey. And I would kind of flip the paragraph around and go, what is the something I'm trying to convey? And then find the right words. Use your thesaurus, man, that actually do the work of conveying it. That sort of thing. Challenge your imagination is what this says. I honestly think, rather than, I don't know, it depends on how you feel about it and where you feel like you're at in your ability in this process. It's like, I wonder if I would lean more heavily on the strategy than the research side of things on this sort of thing, where it's not necessarily that you don't know what to do, it's just that it's a muscle that you have to build. And so it's more about the exercises, putting the work in, taking your time to do it right. Don't that's what my old band teacher used to say, practice makes permanent. So set aside some time to really focus on this as you're writing, to really give yourself space and not be so much about like the word count and like getting it done. It's like, no, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to rewrite this paragraph 8 times until I get it right, so that you're actually working the muscle well. You're working it right and not just building kind of some lazy habits, as we tend to do with the areas that we're not very strong in. One thing I'm noticing, oh, hi. I'm assuming that's John. Hi, John. With prose description is that efficient descriptions are more POV impressions. True, yeah. That's true. Wow, there's like so many pieces to description. It seems like there's POV, there's tone, there's where they're at in the story, there's what's vital for the space, like I was saying, the geography versus what's vital for the pacing, and it's a lot to juggle. So you can either, it's like you have to figure out what piece of it you need to practice, or figure out a strategy for practicing, which I've already said. But and it might also be a editing thing. The best way to learn is to have your work edited. And so that might be finding someone who on a regular basis can go over your descriptions and say, this is wrong, do this better, this is a better way to do it. And not just kind of as a finished edit sort of thing. We're going over the whole story and the whole book and all of that, but specifically someone to look at your descriptions on a pretty regular basis, that you, again, you can build that muscle, because I think that's one of the most effective ways to learn writing execution. I suppose I should come back over here. Yeah, are you having any ideas or thoughts, Melanie, on I'm hoping that this will just be helpful and hopefully inspire everyone toward working on their craft more. I don't know if Max or Ryan is still in the chat, or if Bright Swords, you wanted to, if you had anything to share about what do you feel like your weak areas are, and do you know how to tackle them? That's what we're talking about. Here, I can put this on screen again. I need to I think I need to work on this graphic, and I kind of just threw it together, so I'm like now thinking of things that need to be on here, or a different way to kind of break things up, but set this aside long term and just be like keep adding things to it, because I feel like I reference stuff like this all the time. Sometimes I struggle with finding a way to interweave themes into the plot in a way that enhances the story, specifically with multiple characters. Ooh, yes. Ooh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. I am familiar with this issue. Well, maybe I'll go back to my notes here, because you can see in the theme category, I actually broke it down into 3 different pieces. It's for me, it makes sense this way, at least, is argument, message, and character arc. And I think that theme, every writer kind of has a different like formula on what theme means for them and how they approach a theme. I mean that very literally. Like, I've read a lot of writing books, and each of them will have kind of a different little, this is what theme is section of the book, and they all explain it differently, and you're kind of like, okay. So I think part of theme as a writer is actually coming to understand how you understand theme and what your formula for theme might be. And so this is a little bit more about how I think about it. There's the argument, which is you take your subject, which, something very broad, might be sacrifice, it might be, it might be femininity or masculinity, or the play between femininity and masculinity, or it might be what is a hero, or, it's like your subject. And then you pull it apart on all sides and see why different people would have different perspectives on it. And that's the argument piece. Then that's different than your message piece, because the message is actually what you believe about that theme. It's what you want the conclusion to be, what you're trying to say about the theme. So separating those things out always helps me, especially when you're talking about or displaying the theme through multiple characters, because different characters are going to have different perspectives on your message or your subject. And then character arc is more about execution. It's how are you going to express your message through the character journey. And some of that's technical, some of that's you just got to really get down to what your theme is as you work through the structure and the plot, and you're just like, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? Because this is still too vague. This is still too vague. This is still too vague. So with multiple characters and incorporating the theme into the plot, again, I'm going to recommend The Anatomy of Story. That is what that book is about. For the most part, is how to start with your theme, it's how to start with your message and build everything out of that, including your world, your characters, not just your main character, all your characters, your story pathway, not going overboard with the arguments. Okay, so I guess our arguments isn't necessarily a dialogue thing. And maybe this is some of what you're thinking about in terms of incorporating into the plot. I'm going to try and think of an example. Yes, some of the argument will come out in the dialogue, but your arguments are more about the outcomes of those characters' view on the subject and how that affects their reality, how it affects their character tactics. This is what I mean when I say that I sat down to write about how to have meaning built into your story, and I was like, how do I say anything about this? I don't know. Gotta think of an example. Okay. One of the ones we used for the Four Corner Opposition was Bug's Life. And I hope you're familiar enough with the story of Bug's Life. It's not like the other characters argue with Flick about freedom. And I'm trying to remember. I think we had Flick and Ada on the top as order and control, order and freedom, or something like that. And then we had the circus bugs as the negative expression of freedom, and Hopper as the negative expression of control, or something like those values. And so it's not that Ada and Flick got into a lot of arguments about freedom versus control, or that Hopper and Ada got into a lot of arguments about what type of control is good or what type of control is bad. It's just their actions displayed their view of reality, and their actions put them into conflict. And they did express some things in the dialogue, but Hopper didn't say, oh, order, you have to stick to order because then it's bad. He came in and said, there's a whole speech at the beginning where you meet Hopper, and he's like, this is the order of life. The ants pick the food, the ants leave the food, the grasshoppers eat the food, and and then his brother butts in, and then the birds eat the grasshoppers, just like that one that was going to eat you a while ago, right? And Hopper gets all mad, and that displays, again, Hopper wants to enforce his order because he gets angry at the reality of the order of nature. And so it's not like this argument about all of this stuff, even though it is a dialogue argument. It's how the characters react to the different ideas that actually displays their perspective on the subject. It's more important is shown, not told about the reliefs. He's passionate about a subject, yeah. So it's yeah, I know, yeah. Four corner opposition is a really, really good tool for incorporating the themes with the side characters and kind of building it all out. And like Melanie said, I think it was Melanie. Yeah, you have to narrow in on what your theme is. Like, if that's, to me, that is what writing development is. I mean, obviously you're building your structure, you're building your plot, you're building your characters, but as you're building all of that, you will constantly come back down to, what is this story about? What are we trying to say? And it gets more and more and more and more and more and more specific as you go through. That's something that, especially through Matchmade, I felt was really hammered in, because we would get all the way to the end of editing and we're still talking about, what are we trying to say with this film? What are we trying to, like, what is, especially some of the pivotal scenes at the end. There's like 4 or 5 pivotal dialogue scenes at the end. And it's like, what is each one of these saying about our subject here? And we're still narrowing it down and getting specific. And that was a flaw. That was a problem, because we didn't always have the footage we needed to do that, because we weren't specific enough before we started filming. But it's that, I think, actually is the goal of story development, is to get so specific with what you're trying to say. And sometimes you do know it at the beginning, but then it kind of gets off track with all the different ideas and all the different ways you could go and all the different perspectives, and, oh, this is a nuanced thought on it. And it's like, figure out how to stay true to that original, like, no, this is the heart of it. This is what I feel is key to convey. And you're going to have to come up with, know why that is as well. I'm thinking back to the original question. Finding way to interweave themes into the plot in a way that enhances the story. And in a way, I almost feel like this is the same question as what I started with at the beginning. What I was trying to express, it's like, okay, I could do any scene, but I don't need just any scene. I need a scene that conveys this about the characters, that lets them do these actions, that lets them, I know what I need to do with the characters. I know how I'm portraying the theme and how it interplays with the structure and the characters. But what is the actual scene here that is engaging, is entertaining, that it's almost the same question, it feels like to me. Feel lost and unfocused because they never actually chosen a specific theme or message. As many say, don't choose one. So hard to keep focused on the theme. I don't know. I almost agree with that advice, though, to not choose one. It's a Pixar rule. I don't know which number. Pixar's rules of storytelling. It is trying for theme is a good thing, but you won't know what you're trying to say until you get to the end. Now rewrite. That's the rule. To some degree, I think that's true, because honest storytelling is a self-investigation. It's a self-research thing, It's like, okay, so I want to talk about this subject. as you're writing the story and as you're having to lay everything out, it's like you actually get to know what you think about that subject and what you believe about that subject. Well, believe is a better word because stories are more about belief, but there's kind of like two sides to it. You know, there's the craft side of having the right tools and the right structure and all that sort of stuff to implement what you're trying to do. But the other side of it is actually getting to know what you're trying to do. And I don't think that's like divorced from the writing process. It is the process. It's not that you have to decide at the beginning what you're trying to do and stick to that. It's there's something on your heart and it's for you. The whole process for you as the writer is about investigating it and learning the truth about that. And that is a huge piece of the value that you give to your audience or your readers, is the truth that you've uncovered about this thing through the writing process. So I don't think that the guideline is always, stick to your theme, stick to what you decided. The guideline is stick to the truth. And that may change or flow as you go through the process and you really get very specific, get all the way down to the bottom of what you're trying to convey and how it's meaningful to the human experience. Or I wouldn't know how it's meaningful to people, I guess. You want to be deep and layered? You go too layered. You accidentally put in too many themes or lessons. To me that almost sounds like you didn't get to the end, because what true understanding of a subject is the ability to make complicated things simple, right? And so if it's complicated to you still, then you haven't reached the point of understanding where it's simple and you can cut to the heart of what you're trying to say. And so I think the process looks a little bit more like it seems simple, and then you get into it and dive into it, and there's all these rabbit trails and all these nuances and sidetracks and all these different things that play into it, and it feels so complex, and it's a big messy swamp that you're trying to like weave your way through, and you have to keep going and going and going and going until you get to the other side, and then it's simple again, and you're like, oh, now that I'm here, I see the path. And like I said, that's the value that you offer your reader, is now that I've made it to the other side, I can see the path and I can lay it out for you, you know? When in the writing process did you find your theme? Roughing, revising, edits, at some point you need to anchor write so you don't flip-flop. I don't think I find, it depends on what you mean by theme, because theme for me is 3 different things, like it's on this thing here. So you could start with a subject, have an argument about the subject, and through the argument you reach your message. And then through tangling that message with the main character arc through the structure and all that blah blah blah, you find the heart of it, the piece of it that is going to make the difference, because that's actually why structure lays it out that way, because it all comes down to that pivotal choice that the character makes, the pivotal change that the character makes, and that's going to be the simple version. What was the change they needed to make? And it can't be complex because it happens in a moment during your story. And so as you're working through all the structure, you always are coming down, what made the difference? What made the change? What was it? What is it? It's a tiny little piece. So I'm trying to think, because I still don't feel like I've done this successfully. Match Made still feels quite muddled to me at the end. I was just talking about this with Lizzie the other day, that now if I were to tackle Match Made, I would have had a little bit more clarity on what we were trying to say exactly. But our subject, because you're right, there were too many ideas kind of jumbled up in there. Some of the ideas were romance versus realism, and that was kind of obvious in the setup of Holly and Chris, right? Holly was this lover of romance. She wanted to have a romance. She wanted a romantic life. And we talked a lot when developing her character about all the different ways that might manifest in her life. It wasn't just like love romance. It was she wanted everything about her life to be romantic, to feel a certain way, feel artsy and flowing and whatnot. And then for Chris, it was, I don't want any BS. Cut right to the point. Please don't try and color things a certain way to make me feel better. And then we had to get into, you know, why they were the way that they were, which, again, I don't feel like we did particularly well with Holly. Chris has a little bit more put into him on, like, why are you the way that you are? So that was some of, like, the big theme ideas that we were playing with, but it, like, behind that was this idea of opposites attract, and kind of the iron sharpens iron type of idea, where in a relationship, the other person should be able to challenge you in a way that will make you a better person. And I think that was closer to some of the heart of what we were trying to say with the film, because we watched a lot of Hallmarky Christmas movies, all that sort of stuff, and it was always like, this is so fluffy, this isn't saying anything about relationships, it isn't. And so what did we actually want to say about relationships? And it wasn't, oh, it's all fluffy and it's about, like, meeting the right person. It's like, no, it was about conflict and allowing that conflict to make you a better person. And so even though that's kind of specific, it's still not specific enough that when you get to the point of when Holly changes, what causes the change? How does she, you know, it's like we kept, what, and it was compoundedly difficult by the fact that there's two main characters who have opposing arcs, and that's why there's so many long dialogue scenes at the end, because they each kind of needed their change moment and the fallout. Anyway, all that sort of stuff. Characters must push each other either in a negative or positive way. Right. So I couldn't tell you at what point of Match Made it was like, oh yes, this is the theme. This is the message. It was kind of like we started out with an idea, but then we had to explore the idea and be like, is this still supporting idea? Do we have the right idea here? Or are we saying something different about romance? Or, you know, are we, as you get into the weeds with each of the characters, are we talking about how, Holly's meddling and her insistence that love be on her, you know, love be her way. If it's not romantic, she doesn't want it. If it's not flirty and fluffy, and, you know, she has a speech at the beginning about what she wanted out of a romance, and she doesn't actually know how to get there, but she thinks she has like a specific idea. So it's just kind of, are we talking about that? Are we talking about how having mistaken expectations will lead you down hard paths? Or are we talking about Chris, where he's so cynical from his past experiences and he needed to learn to let go of that? And so we're talking about cynicism and how you learn from that, you know, get past that. And so in the middle of trying to put these characters together and the story together, it does get kind of messy on what thing are we talking about here, when I think the heart of it was always about how you want your partner to be someone who can help you grow. And I don't think we made it all the way in there in the end. That's for sure. I would write some things differently, but because I feel like we did kind of get all distracted in all the different different character things that were going on. See your point with those examples. He probably couldn't remake Matchmade. That's probably true. It would be a completely different movie now. I would also... I think it would be very different now because we're a little bit older and have a little bit more relationship experience. That was also a very interesting stage of life to be in because I was... I've been married for a year, maybe 2 years at that point, and Lizzie hadn't really ever been in a relationship. And so a lot of it, I think, could be informed better now. I guess. But, yeah. Anyway, characters have to have friction. Sparks must fly. Yes. I agree. And that's part of that entertainment factor. Has to be fun to watch. I do think that there are some things with Matchmade that I'm like, I feel like I could make this more fun to watch now. Like, I would know a little bit more about what would be entertaining about this. We got a little caught up in our messaging to know how to make it entertaining. But Megan, you were asking, do you think if you had a very specific message written down for yourself to keep you grounded and the characters clear with desire and story, it would help? Yes. Maybe. If you know, I don't think you have to know before you start. If you walk in knowing that part of the goal is to figure that out as you go. And that's probably going to require a little bit more rewriting and restructuring. I think you can have an idea. Again, like the Pixar thing says, you can have an idea for a theme, but you won't really know what you're talking about until you get to the end. And I really believe that's true. Like, because to write is to think. It is to process. And so we may think we know things, but we haven't processed them enough to have understanding. And it's through the writing process that you process it and you come to understand it. Unless you pick a topic that you already have understanding on it. And I don't just mean intellectual understanding. I mean emotional understanding. Something that you've been through and revelations that you've had in your life that you've processed and you've been able to implement in your life. Things like that where you actually have understanding and not just intellectual. I wanna, you know what I'm saying? Especially as Christians, there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom like in the Bible that I don't feel just because we could say it or we know it, we know the verse, we know the principle off the top of our head, doesn't mean we've lived it. And that would be the difference in a story is, and I don't think you have to live it in order to be able to write it, except for that through writing it, you will live it in your imagination. Like that feels wrong. Like you will imagine living through it, which is true, but it's like you will. This is a Jordan Peterson quote, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's you say your stupid thoughts so they don't kill you, or something like that. Because if you lived your stupid thoughts, you would die. That would be the end result. That is the point of conversation. That's the point of thinking. It's the point of story. Is you learn those lessons in your imagination so you don't have to learn them in your real life, right? And live with the physical consequences of those, of the emotional learning of getting that experience. Yeah, keep the central focus is the truth. I want to share the truth about this thing, and whether that's the emotional truth or the truth of reality, or just wanting to relate with people through real things that are happening to you or have happened to you, or there's a lot of different reasons. It's like you don't have to figure it out at the beginning. I think having a good idea, having a good intention, I think that's the key at the beginning. It's not that you're going in with no intention. You have a good intention. You have maybe good intention is the wrong word because that has connotations I don't mean, but you are being intentional. It's not that you're trying to say nothing or that you're against saying something. It's you are being intentional to say something. You just don't know all the way what it is yet. For instance, that short film that I was writing earlier this year, or earlier last year, actually, before we were moving, I was pregnant. Remember that? I started out with, I want to tackle the subject of revenge. I didn't really have a message because generally when I think about revenge, just not having a ton of life experience is, well, that's not true either as I got into it. But it's not like the type of dramatic revenge that you think of, but the type of petty revenge where your sibling takes your thing and so you kind of have this instinct like, oh, I'll take my thing back, or I'll take your thing because you took my thing, or I'll be upset with you, and that is a form of revenge. You can always connect it down to things you've experienced emotionally, but it's not like I had a real strong understanding of revenge. It was kind of like, revenge is bad, right? And that should be the message. Revenge is bad, right? But in having to write it and having to have different perspectives on it, right, I learned more clearly what what revenge is emotionally, and what it causes, and the cycles of revenge that happen. And it's not like starting out with the intention to say revenge is bad was the wrong place to start. It just wasn't with understanding, and it wasn't specific. Like God working, our subconscious taking over, maybe both. Well, I honestly believe that learning, growing, it's always from God. And so I totally believe that tackling, challenging things that are going to cause you to grow, of course it's going to be from God. And choosing to tackle challenging topics that are going to cause you to grow is being responsible and in line with what He wants in your life. And so that's definitely an area to be Spirit-led, where there's two kind of pieces of it. There's like the inspiration piece and the interest piece. This is something that's very interesting to me, something that is exciting for me to explore, and that's kind of like the identity that He's put inside of you, And then there's also what God has laid on your heart to work on and to learn and to understand and to grow in right now. And those things, magically, they often dovetail, right? And that's part of being Spirit-led as a writer, is holding those things that you're interested in that sound exciting with a loose hand as kind of a starting place, and then going, okay, but God, like, what am I supposed to be working on right now? What are the things that you want me to work through and learn about and understand right now? And cooperating with that. I have a few Jewish friends, and the creative act is considered an aspect of the wisdom of God. Yeah. If you go in focused on truth, then yes, you will be taught by it. Yes. Right? Right. So if we want to teach truth, we have to first know truth. Right. But not... I think the word know is misleading, because, again, you can know scripture, you can know principles, but unless you understand them, do you have wisdom about it? Do you know what I mean? It's not just know them, it's understand them. And be searching for God's understanding of them and not your own understanding of them, which isn't just another way to say truth. Bird by bird, that you can't write a goof story unless you're honest about your own flaws, honest about people's views and judgments, and not showing bad arguments. Right. This is I forgot to talk about this while we were talking about comedy. Comedy is more real than many other types of stories. Fundamentally, you have to actually understand human nature, understand flaws and truth and goodness and all that sort of stuff in order to be really comedic. It's kind of this oxymoron. You think that comedic things would just be kind of goofy, kind of silly, the surface sort of stuff, but when you kind of look at it carefully, it's quite deep. Often quite deep, and it's pointing to deep truths about reality. bad faith arguments, maybe, is what you mean. Straw men. Anyway, I don't know if any of that's helpful to you, Megan. It's a lot of what's been on my mind as I'm trying to write down some of this stuff. But like maybe you could write it down at the beginning, but I think more what would be helpful is to be... maybe it would help you to write it down. I don't know if it would help me, but... and have it in front of you kind of at all times while you're writing, wherever that is, but is to actually kind of be in conversation with God as you're going through this, of like, is this truth? Is this lining up with what you want me to be writing about? Is this where my heart should be in this? It's like there's all these questions that kind of get brought up as you explore subjects and you're looking for the truth in them. And so it's more about that relating with yourself and relating with God through it, I think, than having a plan and sticking to the plan. That's what I would guess. Like I said, I don't feel like I accomplished that with Match Made, and this other feature that we've been working on has required it a lot more. So I honestly think I've learned more about this through writing our second feature. Even though I haven't written it yet. Still working on the treatment. Taking a break from the treatment, really, since all this crazy life stuff started happening. But the treatment is where I work through all this, to a certain degree. And then once we start writing, you continue to work through it, to continue to get more specific with what you're trying to say, because you're trying to give voice to it through the characters. So you can make notes about what not to do. Yeah, that was Match Made for me. I was just like, and we're not going to do that again. And we're not going to do that again. So you can start with structure and have a plan, but you must be willing to change and adapt the story. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. You gotta be. He wants to be in there. They're in the process with us, you know. It's not divorced from our faith. So, well, I was gonna go until 4-ish, so we got about 20 minutes here. What other subjects do we want to go over? Oh, I guess I've had this graphic up the whole time. Looking at the character web. Conflict, all that sort of stuff. How would you write relatable siblings or tips to do so? I think you'd have to go some of what we've been talking about. I think my first questions to kind of start with are, what is my own experience with siblings been, and be really honest there about the positives and negatives. Because again, honesty is where you've got to start. What do I understand? Like, if we're talking about theme, we're always starting on our own understanding. That's basically what I was saying there, is you start with what you know. You start with head knowledge or emotional knowledge, but it is our own understanding. And then the whole process is kind of like, this is what I understand, but what is the truth? This is what I understand. What do I not understand about the pieces of this? And so my first place to start would kind of be putting words to my own experience, my own understanding of what it was like to have siblings. What were the best parts? What were the worst parts? What meant the most in the end? At the end, you still have siblings, so we haven't reached the end yet, but... and I'm sure as comedy writing, it would be... things that would come up there would be like, what are the funny things about having siblings? Those are coming from a truthful place, you know. It's just kind of isn't it actually kind of funny when you stop and think about it, that there's these people that you share so much in common with, yet you're so different, and you know, there's like, well, everything that you could say there. But then it's also like, I would go from there to any questions that I have. Why is this? Isn't that curious? Isn't that weird? Why is this? And what your mode of investigation is totally up to you. You like, I have a very psychological interest, and so for me, I would be like, what is the psychological purpose of siblings, or you know, stuff like that. What is the what would you call that? The And with this would come a lot of different perspectives that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but like, what is the evolutionary biology explanation for siblings and the way that they affect us and our growth and blah, 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 blah. And what do I think about those things, and what does God think about those things? And like, that might be an area that I would go into because I'm interested in it, but another area would just be talk to God about it. Like, God, why do we have siblings? Like, what's the point and purpose here? And what are the common experiences that everyone has with siblings? It's going to be the heart of comedy for sure. And from there, you're getting some through all of that kind of exploration, investigation, you're kind of just getting food for thought when you actually go to build your characters, which I think you've probably already built your kind of main characters here. But yeah, then it's just using those truths and that foundation to build a dynamic that is endlessly ironic or funny or heartfelt, or it's like it kind of needs all of that built into it. Like I said, it's all about character dynamic really with comedy. The execution, I should say, is all about character dynamic, of having fiery, dynamic characters with some real meat behind them, so that you don't run out of stuff to do with them. Yeah. And setting up those situations. It's a character development. Character development always involves weaknesses. So when building that character dynamic, it's always about, I don't know. Could you universally say that if you have like a duo, that they should have opposing strengths and weaknesses? I don't know if that's true, because I don't know if there is necessarily always binary opposing strengths and weaknesses. I think you could get more creative than that. So, the stereotypes would be, oh, this one's serious and that one's funny. Well, I don't actually think that's their strength and weakness. Like, why is that one always funny and that one always serious? What about their character has put them in that place? Because I think there's more interesting strengths and weaknesses that could be. Like, people are funny because they're insecure, or because they feel like that's where they have value, or, there's all these reasons you can get into. And so those weaknesses would lead them to other reactions besides being funny that the other character can provoke or also play off of. And for being serious, okay, you have to, is it a character trait to be serious, or is it a reaction to, and maybe there's a difference between someone who can't take a joke. I don't think that's what they mean by serious, though. That's someone who's sensitive, not serious. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling, but do you guys get what I'm kind of saying about weaknesses? Don't have to be binary. It's not like, oh, so she's organized and he's not, and that's their strength and their weaknesses. But because he's not organized, he's more, free and more carefree, I should say, and more flexible, and those will be his strengths, even though he can't be very. He's like. I don't think strengths and weaknesses come in such straight binaries, or at least it's not very interesting. Relatable siblings, though. Siblings have inside jokes. There's kind of the surface things that are relatable. We have inside jokes. We have shared memories. We have siblings have a very honest knowledge about each other that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It is a good thing, I think, to be truly known by people, but it can, if you're not a very good sibling and the other siblings truly know that, it will lead to negative relationships, is what I meant. But I think siblings lead you to have an appreciation for different strengths and weaknesses. And it also depends on the age of your characters. I don't know if they're are they learning lessons about each other, or they already have established relating habits and patterns that they know about each other, or because they're a little bit older and they kind of already have a very established rhythm, or are they younger where they're trying to kind of find their place with each other. There's different places they could be. I don't know. I would just keep asking the question, why? If you see relationships that you like, even relationships that aren't siblings but are like friendships in real life, in TV, and you're like, wow, I really like how that was portrayed, and you can always just be asking why. What made that compelling to me? How could I replicate it or apply that idea to my characters? Feel like a character flaw or weakness can sometimes be their idol, and from their idol comes fruit of other negative things. Yeah. That's true. That's a good way to think about it. Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I'm probably going to start wrapping up here a little bit. You can hear my voice is like starting to give up, so we should probably wrap up. I'm probably going to be kind of missing in action here for the next couple months. Baby is due any day, so just kind of hanging around waiting for that to happen. And then I'm looking forward to newborn life, but also like recovering and being able to get back into the rhythm of life. I've just kind of felt on pause for the last few months, and I'm done. I'm feeling kind of done with that feeling, but yeah, this was a lot of fun to just dive in and talk about writing, talk about things. It's my favorite to do. Conflicts are really important for siblings. What they can enjoy together. Yep. It was great to hang out with you guys today too. I hope this cough goes away. I'm done with it. Ugh. I really hope my voice like heals soon. It's been quite interesting to have two little kids running around. And I can't like not yell at them. You know what I mean? I have to speak loudly because they're noisy, and I'm like, I can't actually raise my voice to that volume. Trying to get my 4-year-old's attention. Hey, stop talking so I can talk to you. It's been funny. And I hope you guys are having a great spring. It finally is turning spring for us. It's been, despite the groundhog's predictions that spring would not last another 2 weeks, whatever he predicts or whatever. Winter has lasted until now. It's only just starting to ease, and I'm excited about that, being able to go outside. All right, thank you, gals. I will see you in a while. I hope, I just pray blessings on all of your projects and your processes. I really pray that the Lord would be in them with you, and that you would feel His presence and His guidance in what you're trying to do and accomplish. And I pray open doors and speedy solutions that when walking with you, the burden is light and you don't have to work so hard. And so I just pray that everyone here listening to the stream can feel that lightness, that they can put their faith into you, Lord, and would just be able to walk with you through through the difficult things and the easy things and the fun things. But yes, bless them, Lord. All right, I'm gonna turn off the stream here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is a lot of fun.